FutureLearn and Royal Holloway University presents Meet Some Audio Describers.
My name is Coco Brown. My pronouns are she, her. I am a light-skinned, half white, half black mixed race woman. I am rather tall and I have blonde hair that is swooped back into a short curly style, and I'm wearing a black long sleeve top and some small gold earrings. And I am an artist, audio describer and producer.
Hi there, I'm Michael Skellen. I am wearing a blue shirt and a blue wind cheater. I have tanned olive skin, mixed race, Filipino, English and Australian. I'm wearing brown glasses and have black hair, which is side parted into a quiff. And I am an audio describer and a performer. I've been audio describing for theatre and film and television.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Margulies, and I'm a white woman in my late 40s with dark brown hair with lots of grey in it, and I'm wearing an audio describer's black top. I'm an audio describer. I trained about 15 years ago, and I work in theatre and also museums and galleries. I mean, my feeling is just there's always so much on stage. There's far more visually happening than we can possibly fit in to an introduction, let alone in a live show. And then it's about thinking about, well, which of those things are relevant? You have to make decisions about what's relevant. They've been cast and then dressed and costumed, and the costumes are saying something as well. So yeah, it's those choices, and I suppose the fact that we do have to leave things out then makes it more loaded what we put in.
I've got to now pick the most relevant piece of information for the audience member who I'm serving, who I'm here for, or the audience members. I have to pick the most relevant piece of information, and then on top of that I have to then describe it in a way that is accessible to people who may not understand that very specific culture or very specific something. So I have to make it accessible, and then on top of that you want to put language in it that still adds to it and really describes what is being seen on stage. And then you kind of add the next layer of, okay, but what about the piece that I'm describing for? Does that language make sense? And all of those things are like equal parts really exciting for me and also really difficult in describing that.
Yeah, that thing comes back to also where we're positioned as the describer. Like, if I want to talk about different kinds of black hair, do I have the vocabulary and also the understanding of what it means in different contexts, and whether it's saying something about Peckham today or Nigeria 100 years ago, and kind of just having to think, well, the play seems to be saying that this is important. The production seems to be picking this feature up. It's not that people just happen to have their hair done this way, so let me try and find out what it means, and talk to the designers and talk to the directors as well as the actors.
Every single time I'm doing a show, I kind of agonize over the fact that if there's a person of color, how am I going to kind of work with them? How am I going, because in the one hand, you've got a visually impaired person who comes into the theatre and they're there to watch a show. But on the other hand, you have a person of color. There's someone coming in with all of these experiences and like quite a struggle. And there's an industry change that's happened. So you're there just kind of looking at this and seeing a kind of history of how the industry has changed. And then at the same time, you're kind of, you can't really say that, but you can, because then you think to yourself, well, a visually impaired person who has been going to the theatre for 50 years should be able to have that same conversation of, oh, this is different to 20 years ago. So every show I do, even if it's just a one-line person, I kind of see them and I'm like, I want to describe this. And if I see it's a mixed race person, I kind of want to go, the mixed race experience from my point of view is different to that other experience. And a mixed race person like me likes going in and watching a show and being like, wow, you've done that. Like, I've got some friends who are Filipino English people going on stage and doing Shakespeare, which is my jam. So I see that and I go, this is amazing. I want a visually impaired person who might be like me as well to kind of have that feeling.
I actually love describing diversity. It really excites me. It is showing how the times are changing, and I get to say that. The thought of being able to look at a stage full of, let's say, 6 black people and find 6 different ways to describe their skin tones, which might be similar but not the same, you know, or describe their hair, which might be similar but not the same. Because not only do I want to be able to pay tribute, I guess, to them on stage and to what they bring, but I also get to discover new ways to describe these things and offer that to the people who are listening to our audio description, and potentially in some way teach them a little bit about the culture of the people on stage. So it's really interesting that we've spoken a little bit about race and describing visual differences and visual diversity. I was wondering if anyone has described sort of more gender diversity, like things that may not be so visual but are still important to the character or the performer.
Yeah, I just described a short film actually, a sort of contemporary circus work with a performer, well, one performer and a jerry can of water. And you know how you normally move between using somebody's name and their pronouns in your description, in the through description, and I just found there was quite a lot more work to get my head around the way that if I use the first name, then it's going to be singular verb that, you know, so and so moves across the room, and if I use they, then I'm changing to plural verb. It's like, oh, it's a bit jolting going sort of in one breath from one to the other, or I was worried about it being jolting for the audience.
That can sometimes be a bit difficult for people, but I think it's one of those things where we're all as a society learning every day differences about people and the diversity that is continuously growing in our world. We're all still learning, and that's where we need to be able to give each other grace in terms of using pronouns and making sure that that's reflected in the work that we do. But then beyond that, it's also about the audience. Every audience has a job when they come to see a show, and they have to put in a little bit of work. That's just part of our job as an audience, is to say, okay, you know, at some points, this describer might use this person's name, or they might use the pronoun they, and therefore parts of the language will be changed according to that. But my job as an audience member is to understand that. And then our job as audio describers is to make sure that they have that set up. So in like the audio introduction, and if you've got somebody who maybe uses they, them pronouns, it's about setting that up for our audiences.
The way I get around that in my head is that it's just about being kind and doing my best to not hurt anyone. So it's like this, it's just this thinking that, like, am I doing anything that's hurting someone? And a non-binary person hearing themselves hearing themselves be called the wrong pronoun hurts them. And sometimes I need to make that mistake and live with that, and then just be like, okay, I'm not going to hurt them again. I just kind of take my personal responsibility as the audio describer and say, this is a way to not hurt that person. And then I'm juggling my responsibilities between the visually impaired audience and the performer who is being hurt if I use the wrong pronoun. And then I kind of just go, how can I do this so that I'm serving both in the best way I can? My conclusion to that is then I just say, they go to pick up a glass. And from there, it could be confusing, but if I keep doing this the entire time, then then the audience will be like, well, that's just something that Michael does. But if everyone keeps on doing it, then the audience can say, well, that's something that everyone does now. And then the language becomes normal, and they has changed its meaning.
I love that point about kindness, and it was, you know, being prepared to stand by whatever you say about someone, to think about what the actor would think if they heard that description. And I mean, it's making me think of the one occasion where a member of our audience who'd listened to the audio description in a recording came to the touch door and repeated a a phrase that had been used about the actor that was about personal characteristics. It was a kind of slightly informal phrase that the actor took personally, and I felt very, very bad for them. And it really did make me think, yeah, you have to be able to stand by every word that you say.
This is where the questionnaire, the describing diversity questionnaire, has come in so handy, because I did a short film, and it was young people of colour from just young people of colour, and in the video it was the first time I'd used the questionnaire, and so they get sent a questionnaire about themselves to describe themselves, and it gets sent back to us. And so I read this and I was like, this has taken out so much of the stress of like trying to figure out what the what wording they like to use, because some people like to use Black British, some people don't like to use that. And there was so many different nuances to the way that people answered. And one of the amazing things was a lot of the girls described their hair in the way that they would in like 4C, or like these kind of like these letters and numbers that I'd never heard of before, but I was able to take the information that they gave me and then kind of figure it out in my head what was relevant to the visually impaired person.
As a black woman, that means so much more to me. Like, it's, if somebody was to tell me, oh, I've got 3C hair, and then the actress who is playing against me has 4C hair, I automatically know, because I'm aware of that context, that you've got two very different hairstyles, which for me, knowing the cultural context, also gives a lot of backstory. And it's sort of, for me, that it's okay that not everybody will understand those nuances, but I think it would be unfair to not offer those nuances to the people who can understand them just because some people couldn't. So I'm really glad that you actually kept those specifics in. Yeah. And that works in all dimensions, I guess, of diversity. Is like, just because I don't know what type of head wrap this Indian performer is wearing, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't know and I shouldn't be specific about that, because it might matter to somebody else, you know? Because it's representation, really, and it's in quite a clear, clean form.
Yeah, going back to that point about how theatre has changed, it makes me think of something that I didn't actually describe. I worked on as a designer, but a youth theatre production of Lorca's Blood Wedding, and it was in southeast London. I'd say probably 75% of the company members were of Black or Caribbean heritage, and at some point the bride is getting ready, and the maid takes a comb and says, "I'll just make your wave look beautiful." And someone in the audience heckled, "That's not a wave, that's a weave." And it was just like beautifully timed heckle. And it was also like, you know, not all theatre is about fourth wall. It's about, you know, and especially with pantomime, youth theatre, you know, you're getting this kind of crossover between the performer and the character. And if I had been describing that and just allowed the illusion to continue that we were in some, you know, mythical Spain of 100 years ago, then the people in the audience wouldn't have understood the heckle. You know, they wouldn't have got the texture of what was going on.
Royal Holloway University, supported by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and Vocalise.